Hi, friend, and welcome back to Marvelous Friends, your home for all things Marvel Cinematic Universe and beyond. I'm Rhett, and today I'm counting down 10 characters I would like to see come from the comics to the MCU. Before we get started, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Now, roll that credit. This last Saturday was International Pride Day, and Sunday celebrated the anniversary of the Stonewall riots, which was one of the major launching points for LGBT rights and the LGBT movement here in the United States. And in the United States, all of June itself is considered Pride Month. So, in celebration of that, I wanted to count down 10 characters I would like to see come from the comic books to the MCU that are LGBT in some way. Now, these are my own personal preferences, my favorite characters that I have from the comic books that I would like to see. And it's not necessarily a ranking based upon how important their representation are or anything like that. Though, when I'm talking about them in the list aspect of it, I do kind of mention some of those things, just so you're aware. This is completely my opinion and nothing else. Also, these could be showing up in Disney Plus franchises or in the films themselves, or any combination of the two. I do believe moving forward we're going to see a lot more crossovers between Disney Plus and films, or at least I hope so, than that we saw with the Marvel Television and the MCU films in the past. Even though the Marvel Television and the Marvel Studios productions were interrelated and took place in the same canon universe, there wasn't very much crossover of the characters themselves. So I'm hoping with this new kind of format going forward with Disney Studios and Marvel Studios and Disney Plus, we'll see a lot more interchanging of characters between everything that is available to us as fans. With that stated, though, let's go ahead and jump into this list with my number 10 pick. Number 10, Hercules. Marvel Comics depicted the Greek mythology character of Hercules as bisexual during his run in the Extreme X-Men storyline. Now, since then, Marvel Comics has kind of pulled back on this and saying that he's not actually bisexual and that it was just for this one storyline that he was bisexual and that he's actually straight as the main character tells it. And this is a really big shame, as many of those who identify as bisexual I know have kind of looked at Hercules as kind of a portion of representation for them, especially male bisexuals who don't necessarily get a lot of representation out in the world. And so for Marvel Comics to kind of renege this really needs to be course corrected. And I think introducing him into the MCU as a bisexual male would be a great way to kind of fix this problem that they've created for themselves and kind of lift them out of that hole that they dug. And though I would love to see this because I think bisexual males need a good representation in media more because oftentimes they're kind of looked down on or kind of passed over, as many people think that it's just a phase for bisexual males or it's not really a thing and they're just actually gay and saying that they're not. And I think some good representation for those who do identify as bisexual and male could go a long way in today's world. However, I don't believe this is going to happen anytime soon, and so I have to place Hercules at number 10 on this list. I have a whole video kind of depicting why I think that Hercules will not be joining the MCU, and you can check that out up here in the card if you want more information on that. And I do encourage you to check out that video. It's a really good video, and I had fun making that one because I love the character Hercules, both as a Greek myth and as a Marvel character. But unfortunately, I don't think he's going to be coming to the MCU. Number 9, Valkyrie, aka Brunhild. Valkyrie is already in the MCU. That is correct. And it is confirmed that moving forward, Theresa Thompson will be playing a bisexual Valkyrie in the upcoming Thor 4, Love and Thunder. So why do I have Valkyrie still on this list? And that's because I want to see the Brunhild version of Valkyrie from the comic books. We saw a small glimpse of her in the flashes to the past that Valkyrie had during the Ragnarok film, and I'd like to see this explored more, especially as we're seeing Theresa Thompson really explore what a bisexual female character would be in the MCU. And I think this would be a great way to do that by introducing the comic book version of Valkyrie into the film. So I want to make a very stressed point here that I am not thinking that we need to recast Teresa Thompson in any way. I think her version of the Valkyrie is fantastic and her casting is perfect. I loved her in Ragnarok. And the great thing about Valkyrie is there are so many of them, and in the comics we just received one version of her because the Valkyries, of course, in both the comic books and in Norse mythology, are a whole group of women warriors who protect warriors on the battlefield and collect them to take them to Asgard after their death. So I think getting to see more of the Valkyries would be really interesting, and considering that the Thor 4 film is entitled Love and Thunder, it'd be a great way to explore the backstory of Teresa Thompson's Valkyrie by introducing some of the other ones and exploring that kind of hinted at relationship we saw between the other Valkyrie in that flashback during the Thor Ragnarok film. It would be just a little bit, and I don't necessarily think it's important to the story to introduce another Valkyrie, but it would be kind of a fun thing to see, in my opinion. So, because of that, yes but no kind of mentality I have for it, I put it at number 9 on this list. Number 8, Miss America, America Chavez. America Chavez would be a great addition to the MCU for multiple reasons. Number 1 in my books is because it means the Young Avengers. I really enjoy the Young Avengers comics and I want to see them come to the MCU in some aspect. And her being a major player on the team means that she needs to be introduced into the MCU. It also makes sense for her to be brought in at this time because we know that the next few projects will be dealing with the multiverse. Now, we know that the sequel to Doctor Strange, The Multiverse of Madness, will definitely be seeing some hopping and distortion of the multiverse. And from what we understand from the Loki and WandaVision series, those two will deal with the multiverse in some way. So it makes sense to bring a character from one of those alternate universes into the main one of the MCU. And that's what happens in the comics with America Chavez's character when she joins the Young Avengers. She's brought from her universe to ours. And finally, one thing I think the MCU desperately needs at this point is more diverse representation. And with America Chavez being represented as a Latina in the comic books, we definitely need more Latin representation in the MCU. We do have some great characters, but primarily the main hero characters are on the TV programs, such as Yo-Yo Rodriguez in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then, of course, we do have Luis in the Ant-Man and the Wasp franchises, but he's kind of a secondary sidekick character and doesn't have any superheroes abilities of his own. So to bring a character that is a main hero to the MCU that is Latin would be great. Now, of course, she is from a different universe and is technically alien. But considering the fact that she is represented in the comics as a Latina means that they would have to cast a Latina actress to represent the character properly. And I will also state here that I know that we are getting Salma Hayek as Ajax in the upcoming Eternals film. However, I'm not really sure at this point how much the Latin aspect of Salma Hayek will be influenced into the character of Ajax in this new female version of the character, considering he is male in the comics. And I'm excited to see how that plays out as well, but because she is Latina and a member of the LGBT community, I think that America Chavez would be a fantastic character to add to the MCU. And her character is done really well because the creator of America Chavez is a bisexual Latina herself, and so obviously she really portrayed that type of character really well, and I think those kind of representations are the most important, is authentic, true representations of a character. Number 7, Living Lightning, Miguel Santos. Miguel Santos is on this list, much like America Chavez, for multiple reasons, and that is because not only does he provide an LGBT character, as he is a gay man, but it brings in that much needed Latin representation in the MCU as a Latin superhero himself. I think also with the exponentially growing number of characters we have, when we come to those team up movies, we're not going to be able to have all of them equally represented in a good way that makes for a good film. So we're going to need to see some more teams constructed within the MCU and not just the Avengers. So groups like the Young Avengers or the West Coast Avengers or the Great Lake Avengers or Alpha Flight or X-Men and stuff like that. We're going to see some other groups formed, and then we'll have every once in a while maybe a big film like Infinity War and Endgame where all those teams come together and we have some smaller sub-Avengers films. And Miguel Santos fits right into that mix as he's a member of the West Coast Avengers And his story also involves the Great Lake Avengers, which is actually a really funny aspect to his coming out story because he thought the Great Lake Avengers, his abbreviation, GLA, stood for Gay Lesbian Alliance, and was very eager to join that group, thinking that's what it was, and that's ultimately what outs him. Another aspect to his story that I think is really important in its representation as far as LGBT, especially men of color, is considered, is that he feels the need to hide it to become a successful superhero and dates women for a long time as to portray a straight facade. And then it's not until he comes out that he reveals that he was never really interested in them and that he was just dating them for show, which in the LGBT community we call that a beard, and it's a real thing. And many men who feel pressure to succeed means that they have to be straight often do this, and some of them get married and have families and ultimately come out much later, causing maybe some strife for those groups and stuff like that. And I think having a character that represents that struggle and that identity issue would be really great for the MCU if that is done properly. All these kind of stories in that aspect that depict a certain kind of coming to your ultimate openness about your sexual identity is very important that it is done properly because it could, of course, be done poorly and then it just kind of wastes the character and the representation if it's done in a way that takes away rather than adds. Number 6, Shade, Darnell Wade. A new member of the X-Men team, I think this character would be fantastic to see in the MCU, and that's because Darnell Wade, aka Shade, is a drag queen, and it's something I've never seen in the comic books before, and that being a male character who dresses up in drag for their hero persona, and that the hero is more of a female and the character behind the mask is a male. And I think that's really cool and really fun, and there's so many great drag queens of color out there who could play Shade. And plus, you get a double bonus with another drag queen being cast as Shade's best friend from the comic books. In addition to all of that, I think there's a really great story there, and I think it's something that'd be very relatable because as much as all of us would say, yes, if I got superpowers, I would do the right thing and be a hero and help save the world and make it a better place. But we are all just human, and Darnell's the same way, and he is a little selfish with his abilities. Initially, yes, he dons the name Shade and helps the X-Men in their endeavors to help save New York, but he also is a little selfish with them and uses his ability to teleport to go on a shopping spree. He is ultimately arrested and caught by the police and has to serve his punishment for doing just what he did. However, after that, he decides to rebrand himself as Darkveil and to become a better person and try his best to do what is always right. And I think that's something that's really relatable and something that I feel like I said, would be more honest if we really thought about it, that that's probably what some of us would do as well if we could teleport. And so I think that kind of storyline to show that, yes, heroes are flawed too, and do it in this way would be a great story and subplot for the character within whatever franchise she is added. Number 5, Iceman, Bobby Drake. To be fair, Shade, Bobby, and the next couple are all X-Men, so we'll see how this all plays out when these characters are eventually introduced, or if they're used, or all of that when the MCU finally introduces their version of the X-Men. However, Iceman is one of the original X-Men, and so I expect and hope to see him represented in the MCU in some way. And one of the major things here, not only with this character potentially, but the others, is that they're going to have to really make sure that they create a different version of the character that stands out so that it's not confused or any kind of issues with people getting things crisscrossed or complaining or whatever or what have you by fans regarding the previous Fox versions of the film. And I love Sean Ashmar's character version of Iceman, but I look forward to see what something different could be. In the Fox version, Iceman was very much so romantically tangled with Rogue, and I think a great way to depict a different version of the character is to focus on the new openly gay version of Bobby Drake in the X-Men comic books. Plus, I think his character has a really great way to relate to so many people in the coming out process, much like Miguel Santos did previously. In his story, we see a major aspect of the confidant, something that so many young gay people have in the process of coming out, and that's a friend to lean and support on. For Bobby, that's Jean Grey. Of course, her way of finding out is a little bit of prying past, privacy and all that as she finds out that he's gay by accidentally reading his mind. However, she very importantly respects his secret and gives his own time in coming out on his own, the whole time providing support and friendship along the way as he figures out who he is. And I think that would be a great story to tell because it's relatable to so many young gay people and older gay people who had similar experiences when they're young. Plus, I really like Iceman, and he's an original character, so I hope we get to see him. Number 4, Jean-Paul Vieux. Sorry about the pronunciation of the last name. I'll be honest, I have never actually thought about how it's pronounced or anything like that, so I have no idea how it's said. I know it's like French, so sorry anyone out there who if they know how to pronounce it properly. But anyways, the next character on the X-Men introductions that I would like to see is, of course, North Star. He is most noted for his front cover issue of X-Men that featured his wedding to his now husband. And I, of course, think he would be a great representation for the LGBT community because he is so well known, but also because, again, we get into the idea of differentiating Fox versus MCU version of Marvel characters. Specifically now, let's look at Wolverine, because North Star has a history with Wolverine. Here we would see an idea of the origins of Wolverine played out through Alpha Flight, who both Wolverine and North Star were members of. And we would potentially see a film, or I would guess probably more likely a Disney Plus series regarding the team of Alpha Flight. This would give us a lot more new characters that we haven't really seen before in films, as well as give us new origins on how Wolverine became a member of the X-Men and his journey along that process. And it's one that I really enjoy and I think would be interesting to see, again, this different take on the character, which is, again, very important. Plus, I would love to see the wedding ceremony of North Star to his husband. If not actually seen it, I definitely need it to be canon and mentioned and represented with his husband and everything like that because it was such an important moment in the comics because it's so much represented what was going on in the greater world at that time regarding gay marriage, and it was such an important moment for so many in the LGBT community that it would be a shame if the character was seen without this pinnacle moment in its history represented as well. Number 3, Graymalkin, Jonas Graymalkin. Graymalkin is maybe a character you haven't heard of before, and that's of course because he's not been featured in any of the films. And actually, if you search major LGBT comic book characters, he's not one that pops up a lot. But I really do enjoy him, and he is a regular featured character in the X-Men, and I think he would make a great addition to the MCU. And I think a lot of that is to do with his backstory. Now, it is a tragic one, and it would be needed to handle very delicately by Marvel Studios and how they represent it, but it's an important story to tell with so many people in the real world today. And that is because when he was a boy, Graymalkin was discovered to be gay by his father, and being pre-revolutionary America, those ideas were not looked upon that great, of course. So the father took his boy and buried him alive. Luckily, he was a mutant and his abilities kicked in, and he was able to go into a state of homeostasis, which kept him alive until many, many years later. He was discovered by Charles Xavier, because luckily the land that his family farmed on would later hold the Xavier Institute, and through a psychic connection between the two, Xavier was able to locate him and free him from his live burial. I don't know what that was that just flew by the window. I think, again, this would be a great story because it's so relatable, but I would just hope that it would be handled in a delicate way that would represent the character properly without really kind of getting to, I don't really know what the term would be here, but it could go wrong really well, really easy. And I would hope that there would be a careful balance here that would represent and tell the story properly without going too far. Number 2, William Kaplan. I don't feel like a lot needs to be said here because obviously he's a major representation of a gay male in Marvel Comics. He's one that a lot of people look to as representation. He's often featured on top LGBT character lists, and that is also because he's part of a very prominent relationship, but we'll come back to that momentarily. I think it'd be great to see him because obviously he's related to a character already established in the MCU, that being his mother, Scarlet Witch. And we do know that we'll be seeing Scarlet Witch's babies, at least, in the upcoming WandaVision series, as in the trailers we saw the cradles, and I believe, if I remember correctly, I will flash a picture of it if it's true, her holding a child at one point in those previews. So we'll definitely see him as a baby, and I think with the multiverse jumping shenanigans that are sure to be happening in that series, we can actually see him age to full young adult that he's featured in the comic books. He, again, being a member of the Young Avengers means it's a team that I would really like to see, and he needs to be realized in that aspect. So there would definitely have to be some shenanigans going on to age him up to the likes of everyone else that we know are out there, such as Iron Lad and Stinger, and so hopefully that happens, but we'll see how that plays out in WandaVision. That brings us to number one, Hulkling, Theodore Altman. Hulkling is, of course, the boyfriend of Wiccan, and I would, out of the two, prefer Hulkling over Wiccan. And it's possibly because maybe there's a look thing that I enjoy because I kind of see a little bit of myself in how Hulkling presents himself as a human, and he's someone I actually really want to cosplay if I ever feel that I'm in the right level of shape to look that Hulk-ish. I enjoy his story as well, and again, it fits really well into the dynamic we already have in the MCU. Hulkling is half Kree, half Skrull, which, of course, that conflict is a major aspect in the Captain Marvel series. And speaking of Captain Marvel, in the comic books, her male predecessor is Hulkling's father, who had a relationship with a Skrull princess, and the two of them had Theodore. Now, of course, the mother fleeing the conflict between the Skrulls and the Kree ended up on Earth and hid the two of them as humans and raised the child here as a single mother. And of course, when the Super Skrull comes to Earth, he then reveals the two of them for who they really are. Eventually, Theodore is actually required to take his position as the royal crown prince of the Skrull Empire, which I think is another really cool thing I would love to see. And again, he's a member of the Young Avengers, a team I've mentioned a few times on this list. Hopefully, we get to see him. If we are introduced to Wiccan, I think he will be definitely close behind because the two of them are so closely weaved in their stories because they, of course, are boyfriends, and a lot of their stories and subplots deal with their relationship and having to be separated and brought back together and the turmoils that that is involved in. And not to have these two soulmates in the movies, if only having one, would be just a shame. So, really and truly, they were a package deal, and I struggled separating them between one and two. But because I, of course, like Hulkling a little bit better, he earned that number one spot. I would love to hear from you guys, though. What do you think of my list? Who do you want to see as far as LGBT characters in the MCU? Is it someone on this list? Is it someone else? Let me know down in those comments. I hope you all had a great Pride Month. I hope you were able to celebrate Pride safely. I know here in Houston, we of course had our Pride celebrations canceled for June, and they have been temporarily rescheduled to later in this year, but we'll see what happens with everything moving forward. If you did celebrate or are planning to celebrate in the future, make sure you're doing so safely and following all of the CDC guidelines regarding social distancing, wearing a face mask, and just general hygiene. That will be all, though. Please give this video a like if you enjoyed it. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe and set the alerts to the channel. And until next time, I hope you all have a marvelous rest of your day. Bye, friend.